colleague, Suzanne Venker.
Hi, everyone. Nice to see you. Thanks for having me. Thanks, Donna. I'm so happy to be talking after Mary Eberstadt. You know, we'd never actually officially met, but so much of our work overlaps, especially the focus on the sexual revolution. And your first book, Home Alone America, was very instructive when I wrote my first book 20 years ago. So it's nice to meet you officially. Okay. Hold on, I can't see very well. It's my reading glasses. I'm sorry. I'm getting older by the day. Okay. I don't think it's a secret that young women today are woefully unprepared for the future when it comes to love and family life. They're very prepared, some might say overly prepared, for the marketplace. But work is just one part of life, and it's not even the best part, right? We know this. The best part of life is finding someone to love who loves you back and having a family. In fact, who you choose to marry and the quality of that marriage will have more effect on your happiness and well-being than anything else you do. And anyone who's been married for any length of time knows this to be true. If that is true, which it is, why then do we not prepare young people, women in particular, for this critical juncture in their lives? Why do we tell them to focus exclusively on work and to ignore the part about marriage and family? I think most of the people in this room know the answer to that. Because we live in a feminist culture that disparages men and marriage. Alexandra Solomon is a psychologist who teaches a course at Northwestern University called Marriage 101. And she says her students have absorbed the idea, think about this, have absorbed the idea that love is secondary to academic and professional success. I think this actually follows really well, too, with what you were just talking about, Mary. Over and over, she writes, my undergraduates tell me they try hard not to fall in love during college, imagining that would mess up their plans, end quote. And more, those plans do not include marriage. And yet we know that the vast majority will ultimately marry someday, and that marriage will be a far greater investment than their degree. I'm not disparaging anybody's education. I just want it kept in perspective. You can't switch out a spouse the way you can switch out a job. People try. Lord knows they try. And more than 70% of remarriages with children fail. It seems to me that's worth paying some close attention to getting it right the first time. That is why women need to be as intent, women and men, but I'm focusing in on women because they're the ones who are getting specifically the message not to do this, need to be as intentional about their love lives as they are about their professional lives. As I say, men do too, but as most of us know, women lead the charge when it comes to love and marriage. Who we choose to marry and how that marriage fares will be the axis upon which all other decisions are made. It totally governs your life once you get to that point. So why don't young women know this? Because they've been steeped in feminism since the day they were born. I talked about feminism with Tucker Carlson last month. I'm convinced he's the only media personality who understands the fallout of this movement and is willing to discuss it on national TV, and I do mean the only one, because in 20 years, I think he stood up here recently, didn't he? Yeah. In 20 years of doing what I do and going on media to try to talk about this issue, it's like, you know, you have to knock down walls to be able to do it, and then when you get there, it's just a constant fight. There's no natural discussion about this, and this includes even Fox News, especially the women on Fox News. It hasn't always been fun, but it was great last month with Tucker. During that interview, he said, quote, "I don't think anything has changed our society more for the worse than feminism." And he's right, of course. but it was very refreshing to hear it said in the media. Feminism has indeed made women's lives, and by extension, men's and children's lives, immeasurably worse. According to a 2009 paper published by the National Bureau of Economic Research, quote, as women have gained more freedom, more education, and more power, they have become less happy, end quote. When this study was released, countless articles and news reports inquired about the irony of it all. How is it possible that women could be less happy after having been liberated? In fact, it isn't surprising at all when you consider that women have been lied to for decades about what constitutes a happy life. Academic and elite feminists who reside in our universities, in the media, in politics, and in Hollywood have told women all kinds of things that just aren't true. Things that make women, and by extension, men and children, very unhappy. Like the idea that women don't need a man, and that children don't need a father. Or that men and women must make the same life choices in order to be deemed equal. Or that staying home to raise a family is less important, valuable, or satisfying than earning a living. These are all lies. Unfortunately, women listened, and men followed, as they do. And here's what we have to show for it. Number one, the complete and utter breakdown of marriage. Over the past 40 years, America has witnessed a meteoric rise in cohabitation, creating a bona fide shack-up culture. Many women can't find economically attractive husbands with whom to settle down to start a family. And father-absent homes are rampant because of unilateral divorce initiated largely by women, around 70%. For no other reason than she's just not happy. And here's a really recent statistic that's very telling. A full half of all 18 to 34-year-olds today, half, are currently unpartnered. Not just not married, but no romantic relationship at all. Half, between 18 and 34. Now, if it had been 18 and 24, you'd be like, okay, 18 and 34? Number two, a persistent and relentless gender war. And just FYI, I didn't bring my book with me, silly me. I do have a recent book out. It's called Women Who Win at Love. And the idea for that particular book is counteracting everything I'm talking about here today by giving women, young women, a path that is a non-feminist path, a countercultural path for which to map out their lives so that they actually have happy lives. But this number two here is the thing that I focus most on with my work, and that's the gender war. With gender roles thoroughly dismantled, men and women no longer know who's supposed to do what. They have no idea how the other sex thinks and behaves or even wants, and as a result are locked in a battle about who works harder than whom. Moreover, sexual activity among married men and women has become a minefield. And that's not an exaggeration, as evidenced by the excesses of Me Too and the so-called campus rape culture. Number three, an explosion of kids who are in full-time daycare and who are home alone after school, resulting in an epidemic of childhood obesity and of lonely, disconnected kids who have ample opportunity to get into all kinds of trouble, including devising ways to shoot up their schools. You never hear about that when we talk about the school shootings. How were you able to manage that? I think about my son, 16, almost 17, and I think about our lifestyle, and I think, there's just no way that could even possibly happen if you're physically there. And by that, by happening, I mean doing all the work prior to actually the event to make it happen is what I mean. 4, a full-scale war on men. And this is another biggie of mine. I wrote a piece for Fox News in 2012 called The War on Men. This is before people started talking about a war on men. And it hit a nerve, it went viral, and ultimately became a short ebook of the same name. And that kind of set me on a different path as far as really honing in on men, because I did hear from so many men after that article came out, obviously, and I heard from a lot of feminists. One of them had in the subject line, "Please kill yourself." It was an interesting time. It went on for a few months, and yeah, you know, okay. It's been a while. Thinking back to it is kind of crazy. Anyway, so this war on men. The utterly absurd and dangerous notion that male nature is toxic or even diseased. There's actually a term for that now, mascupathy. This has become the status quo. Mascupathy, M-A-S-C-U, pathy. As a result, half of the US population is now disenfranchised, or feels disenfranchised, I should say. Believe it or not, I think most Americans know all of this to be true. That might surprise you, because sometimes you think they really don't. But I do think that they do, but they feel helpless, just totally helpless to do anything about it. It's just too big. That's why it's incumbent upon parents and grandparents to instill in their children and grandchildren a different set of values, ones that steer them toward happiness and away from regret, toward family and away from culture, toward marriage and away from the self. Having been in the trenches of suburban family life for the past 20 years, I'm convinced that very few parents are doing this. They aren't doing a good enough job of counteracting the messages that their children are receiving. And these messages are no longer transmitted through one medium, right? Smartphones have upped the ante considerably. And I just personally don't see any other solution or any other option at this point besides parents. I feel like parents, they're it. They're the only thing we've got left at this point. If they don't model and instill good values and raise their children in a countercultural fashion by specifically dismantling the madness in the media and in our schools, I honestly don't see very good things for our future. And I'm not a fatalist, so it's actually saying something for me to say that. So do me a favor, and after you leave here today, just tell one parent, each person just tell one parent that you know well, who still has kids at home, what you heard here today. Tell them that it's up to them to undermine what's happening in the culture, and that if they don't do it, they will have dropped the ball. Because we only have our kids for a very short time. I'm almost an empty nester, and I can't believe it. And early intervention is key. Thanks for your time.